Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jason, the runner here, doing my next interview, which actually on location at the Mad Cow Running Company and Outfitters, which will be opening very shortly. And I am here with one of the owners slash runners that I've known now for a while, and I'm here. We're here to tell her story. This is Colleen Lawrence. Thank you, Colleen, for taking the time out to do this. I know that you've got a lot going on with opening the business and whatever, so I appreciate you taking the time doing this. So, all right, so to get started, let's just talk a little bit about, where are you from? How'd you get into running? Kind of give us the whole story. So.
Sure. So I grew up in Maryland. That's where I was born and raised. High school, college there, and I didn't actually like running a lot at all as a child. So I played a lot of soccer, basketball, softball, and as is typical with any sports team, when you get in trouble, you do running of laps, and so that created a great dislike of running for me. But when I got older, left home and went off to upstate New York. I went to school up there, graduate school up there. And after a couple years of graduate school and lots of time spent inside and trying to scrounge food from seminars and things like that, I gained quite a bit of weight and realized that was not a good thing. I'm only 5'2", so 10, 20 pounds in a 5'2" frame makes for a tough time finding new clothes and stuff.
Right.
So I took up running, and it was just on a whim. Took up running, and there's a nice track near my house. Used the college track that I was at. So I went to Cornell University, and they have a great track. One of my favorite running stories from when I first started running is one night I was out there, and it was freezing cold, and there was snow because there's always snow in Ithaca, New York. Mm-hmm. And underneath of their track is what's called synchrotron. It's a particle accelerator. Mm-hmm. And so the entire ground can be covered with snow, but the track is not because of the heat from the particle accelerator.
Right, it heats it up, right?
Right, so I'm out there running around the track, and one end of the track, 10 deer come in from one end of the track. And so I come around and I hit the straightaway, and the deer are literally, it's like a weird scene from The Lion King, mm-hmm. where you're running down the track and all these deer are racing down the track with you. And so I just remember thinking, this is what it's all about. This is why you should like running instead of thinking of it as a punishment, like right. when I was a kid, doing sports teams. So fell in love with it then, got what I wanted from it, which was, lost some weight, got excited about, being active and doing stuff. And so fell in love with it. And then moved down to Nashville, I guess back in 2007.
So real quick, so were you doing any races at that point, or were you just strictly joy running, 5 miles, 6 miles?
Yeah, just keeping it real. And then right outside where my office was, there was the stadium. And while I adore Cornell, there was not a lot of people that wanted to go to the stadium to watch our football team. Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know you had a football team.
It happens.
Okay.
So the stadium was frequently available for me to run the stairs. And so I would run the stairs at the stadium. That probably should have tipped me off that I would pick a bad hobby like ultra running later in my life.
Right, absolutely.
Yep.
So you came down here. Yep. And so when did you actually get into, when did you decide, hey, I want to start running? Maybe, did you start with a half marathon? You do a 5K, 10K, obviously you were probably at least running 5K, 10Ks probably already, but what was what got you into it? Was it a half marathon? Was it a marathon? What was it?
So you're right, 5Ks, usually at Thanksgiving with my family when I would come home to visit. But my first race that I actually printed off a plan online and committed to training for was the Frostbite Half Marathon out in Cedars of Lebanon State Park. And really love that race. They've changed the course a number of times over the years, but it's very affordable. It's great people, great race, and a lot of folks come from all around Tennessee to come and participate. It's one of the Tennessee State Park races. Mm-hmm. So that was my first one, and I remember thinking, I'm going to pick something ambitious. It's going to have some hills, and I'm going to set a time goal. And I decided that I should run my first half marathon in under 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Strong goal.
It was a strong goal.
Ambitious.
Very ambitious. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot of places around where I lived to train, to run the distances I needed to prepare, and to make sure I did the speed work, because of course at that time I had no running watch, there was no Garmin, I was just winging it.
Right.
So I used the treadmill at my apartment complex. There was a lot of really rough Saturday mornings, a lot of really rough speed work sessions there. But I trained, I think it was like a 12-week program, printed offline. Did end up meeting my goal. I ended up running my first half marathon at like 1:58, and I was not prepared how uncomfortable I would be after I finished that.
Most of the time, you're really not. I mean, unless you do it by accident, which is what happened with me. When you intentionally try to do it, you tend to be the most uncomfortable. When you're not trying to do it, you tend to mostly be like, oh,
you're in the zone, yeah.
I'm good, yeah. Right.
I was not in the zone. Every mile was uncomfortable.
Right. So you did the half marathon. Did you move to the marathon distance after that?
Yes, more poor life decisions. Met up with some friends who wanted to train for their first marathon, and I'm pretty sure, especially since I know you just recently interviewed Trent, my first marathon was the Flying Monkey. Another bold choice. I did not set a time goal for this one, having read the description of the course. I was lucky enough that the first year that I applied, that I got pulled from the lottery, and I ran that. But I use the term run loosely,
right,
because my training could have never prepared me for the hills.
No, and I felt like last week when we were when I was interviewing Trent, that I showed pictures of what it looked like, but unless you've been out there, you truly don't know how steep it is, how the ups and the downs, and it's just like one after another after another. And it's like right when you think you're going to get a flat, you're going back up again. So. And
it truthfully was not the uphills that were my downfall. My hamstrings were so weak that the downhills at the end, where you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna get at the top of the hill, I'm gonna struggle up, and then I'll be able to pick up some time or gain some momentum on the downhills. My hamstrings were so sore and so weak and so unprepared that my legs almost buckled. So I had to walk all the downhills, and I kind of had to weave back and forth like a drunken sailor to make sure that my legs didn't go out from under me.
Oh, I can believe it. I've never done a half marathon out there, and it was, I can definitely believe it. So you did the marathon. When did you decide that ultra running was kind of your thing? And what was that step? When was it like I really want to go and do I want to do trail running, I want to get out, I want to do something really ambitious.
So I did some trail running while I was training for my half marathon. So I lived in Mount Juliet, I was close to Cedars of Lebanon. I had some dogs. I'm a big fan of taking my dogs trail running. They enjoy it, I enjoy it. So I never really, I know some runners, when they transition from road to trail, there's a little bit of apprehension. Am I gonna twist my ankle? I can't run as fast on trails. Will I get bit by a snake? And I don't ever remember having that problem transitioning. It was just going from running with my dogs to running further without my dogs, but all on trails. So that wasn't really an issue. In terms of jumping to the ultra, it was something that my husband and I actually decided to tackle together. So moved here, a few years later, got married to my husband, who was not a runner when we met. And he never pushed him into it. I figured people have to decide their own hobbies, and certainly running is a big commitment of time.
It is.
And let's face it, if you don't like it, it's uncomfortable and not fun.
Right.
But he watched me finish races and watched me train for races, and then just one time he decided, you know what, I am going to go running. And he went running with me and never looked back. I will give you one quick story about that and then get back to the ultra. So the first time he ran from our house, his furthest distance from our house was 2 miles, and we live in a very rural area, lots of cows, lots of coyotes. So we had a 4-miler planned. That was his long run. So we ran 2 miles from the house, and we're standing out there, and there's stars in the sky, there's no lights around, random farm animals in the distance, and he stops me as we're getting ready to turn around and go back, and he goes, "This is the furthest I've ever been from my car." And I looked at him and I'm thinking, okay, this is a reminder of what it's like, when you're just starting out. And I appreciate that that level of wonder and fun that he was having. And of course we got home and he called every family member he knew, friends he knew, and he said, hey, guess what I just did? And so that was really a fun experience to be part of him getting into the running community. And so as part of that progression, you know, we trained to do his first half, we trained to do his first full. And then we decided, I think it was December of 2016, we were gonna do a 50K. So we'd done a marathon, and in our minds, what's 5 more miles?
Yeah, that's generally what most people say.
Those 5 miles are important. So we did the bell ringer out in Montgomery Bell State Park.
Yep. That's a good race. So you did that one, and you obviously enjoyed it because, you know, when you look at Colleen's ultra sign up, there's a ton of races on there. It says she's ran 58 races, but I know she's ran more than that because not all of them are on ultra sign up. And the thing about her is, you know, she's a very strong runner. You know, she places in the top 3. She's placed at some challenging races, and she's done some tough races. And, you know, just highlight a couple of those. And then, you know, really, as we're talking about those, we'll talk about some of the other cool things that you're doing as well. So one of the things that really jumped out at me was you did, and I'm going to jump around chronologically, so just bear with me because I'm not good with remembering.
I'm bad with years too, so it's fine. They all
good. Oh, perfect. So Colleen did do the Jackals, which is a race that's put on out in West Tennessee. It's a marathon a day. You do 5 marathons, and Colleen and her husband actually both completed those together. But so 5 marathons in 5 days. What was the draw to that? Plus, from what I remember, it's held like in warm weather. It's held
typically in June. In Tennessee, so that gives you an idea of the level of humidity and kind of the thickness of the air. I think the draw was, we were training for a 100-miler that year, which was later in the year in September. And so in order to prepare for it, we thought, of course, why not run 5 marathons in 5 days? That should, give us a nice touch point for where our fitness is at. And, of course, if we can do that, why wouldn't we be able to run a 100-miler?
Oh, of course, makes perfect sense.
Turns out we never did complete the 100-miler that year, but we did complete the Jackals.
Which arguably might be considered harder. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying.
It's a fair question. So I think the way the Jackals is set up, you run the first 2 races are marathons, and they're all loop courses. So every 4 to 6 miles you pass by the start line. And so the advantage, of course, is there's your friends, there's time people keeping you motivated, all your stuff is there, your special booze and gels and cheeseburgers or whatever you want. The problem is it's easy to sit down and not go back out.
Right.
So it's always a challenge. But the first day you run a trail course clockwise. The second day you run the same course counterclockwise. Then the 3rd and 4th days you're actually at Pinson Mounds State Park, and you run the same course on day 3 and 4. It's the exact same course. And so the psychology of it was pretty difficult. You're running day 3, you're already pretty tired. The course is in nearly full sun, and I think they're shorter loops, so you have to run like 8 or so loops. And it's rough. And of course, as you're finishing day 3, you're thinking, I have to do this exact same thing tomorrow.
Right.
And of course, then on day 5, I forget where that one was, but it's a mixture of trail and road, and it's got some fair vert there. But of course, the 5th day, you just want it to be done. But I think the hardest thing psychologically was, you get up, you do your pre-race ritual, you run, and I use the term run loosely, finish the race, you're celebrating and you're excited because you've just done a marathon, which is not trivial. And then about an hour later, the anxiety hits. You have to go home and foam roll and stretch and eat right food and hydrate and get to bed early because you have to do it all over again.
All over again. And
I get a lot of pre-race anxiety, and so every day having that anxiety was pretty difficult, but it was managing that. And of course, by the end, it was definitely one of the most fun moments where I crossed the finish line, and Joel had just finished his a few minutes before me. And so we're just standing there going, that was amazing. It was stupid. Let's don't ever do that again.
And then you're like, we need to sign up for something similar to that.
Similarly stupid, yes.
Yes, that's the way it works. All right, so you did that one. That one was I remember, because I actually knew you when you did that one. And I remember thinking, what kind of person would do that? And,
Not a smart person.
No, after knowing you for a while, I was like, that's the type of person that would. So you did that, and that's a huge accomplishment all on its own. I've never done anything like that. So you did that, and then another race that really stood out was you did a race on sand, right? I think it was in Destin. And so first off, running is hard enough. Running on sand makes it like way harder. And so again, like, were you just thinking, you know what, let me make this as hard as possible myself. Let me just try to run through some sand and see if I can just talk about that one for a little bit. So so it was in Destin, Florida. What time of year was it held in? What was the setup for that one?
So it was in Destin. I'm trying to remember. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember seeing it and just thinking, the race supports Operation Special Warrior. So it's basically all funds go to Gold Star families. So families whose family member has made the ultimate sacrifice, and then they try to support those families and their kids as they grow up. So that's a cause that I am interested in and passionate about, because I have several family members who have served in the military and Marines, and I'm proud of their service. And so that was kind of an attraction. And then I get out there and I'm thinking, well, it's a beach. I mean, how bad could it be, right? Everybody loves beach running, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna look as good as those people on Baywatch look, right? It's gonna be fantastic.
No. Mm-hmm.
So it was in February, and once again, February in Florida, you're thinking, okay, moderate temperatures.
Right, can't be too bad. It's February, right? It's snowing somewhere in February.
No. So we get down there, and it was unseasonably warm that day. Now, there was a 50K, a 50 mile, and a 100 mile option. The 100 milers started the night before. We went down to watch them start. The 50Kers started about an hour after us the next morning. So we're starting, and we need headlamps. It's dark. All you hear is water. You trip over fish that have died, jellyfish, you just whatever. You're out there in the dark with a headlamp, just running.
Right.
And of course, as you can imagine, there's high humidity. And it was unbelievably warm that day. No shelter. You're out in the full sun, radiating off the beach. So added problems that come from running on a beach, aside from the obvious of where do I run? Do I run close to the water where there's hard packed sand and then I will have water and sand in my shoes for 50 miles? Do I run closer to, the dunes up towards the top where I would pretty much be running in quicksand the whole time, and my calves are not made for that. So,
right. Most aren't.
No. Not for 50 miles. So some decisions were made. In addition to it being so warm in February, that meant everybody was out on the beach that day. Mm-hmm. And when I mean everybody, I mean so many people were out there, and they had no idea what we were doing. So they weren't watching us. They weren't worried about where
they didn't care about you.
Kids, dogs.
You could be dead on the sand.
It didn't matter. Mm-hmm. There were people out there who were fishing in the ocean, so they've got their big poles and their PVC pipes that pulls them, and the lines are running. So you're trying to avoid not hitting anything, any poles, any children. And so ran the race. It's out and back one direction. 13 miles one way. Come back. You're at the marathon point. You run the other direction. So you run the other direction, you get to the out and back, and you can literally see the finish line because there's nothing to get in the way. You can see the hotel where the finishers party is currently occurring, 10, 12 miles down that way. And it never gets any closer. And I remember at one point I'm running back down the beach, and again, loosely termed running. It's more like a hobble wobble because things are just not working as they should at this point. Mm-hmm. And I just remember looking over, seeing this little kid, and his parents were kind of distracted. He was, maybe 3 or 4, and he looked like a little sumo wrestler. He was ready to go. And he's sitting there with this bucket, and he's got this shovel. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he just takes the shovel of sand and just shoves it right in his mouth. And I'm sitting there thinking, was that hallucination? Is this what this is?
Was that real?
Was that real?
Right.
And I look back and I'm like, no.
was
No,
real.
that was real.
That was
Okay,
real.
that's fine.
Kid eating sand.
Kid, I mean, and he took a big mouthful. So I feel bad for what happened later that night to him and his parents.
Right.
But it probably wasn't as bad as how I felt later, so maybe I should have stayed with the kid and eaten the sand.
Well, the important thing is you finished it,
I did.
which is a huge accomplishment, finishing anything on sand.
And of course, Joel did as well.
Joel did as well, so we got it.
Yep.
Joel's being part of this along the way. You've accomplished 100 miles, and that was for I always script name it, a race for the ages, right?
ARFTA. We'll keep it simple.
ARFTA, and that is a LAS race.
It is.
LAS race, okay. Common theme for these interviews that we've been doing here. Third guest, third connection with LAS. So you did the ARFTA, which is it's loops, right? Just like a whole bunch. So you ran 100 miles worth of loops.
101.
101. So that's where in Manchester, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. At Fred Dedman Park. So the way that one works, and I'll take a little sidebar here. Every time we Joel and I, my husband and I, made this jump in distance, it was like we ended up at a LAS Steve Durbin race, and I think it was because they're close, and of course they're well organized, and they put on good events. When we jumped to the 50 mile, or when we did our furthest distance of a 41 mile, we did it at Strolling Gym. When we jumped to the 50, we did it at Tunnel Hill, and when we decided to do a 100 mile, we're like, ARFTA, why not?
Right.
So that was our first and only successful attempt at covering 100 miles. The way that it works is a race for the ages. It ends on Labor Day Monday, and everybody starts as many hours in advance of that stop time based on their age.
Right.
So if you were 84, and yes, we had people who were in their 80s competing, you would start 84 hours before the finish time on Labor Day Monday. And so that's how it worked. And of course, it evens things out a little bit because you've got your younger, zippier runners, and they have to cover as many miles if they want to win the race as someone who is power walking, and has had 84 hours to do it. So yes, I was in my late 30s, so when I did this. And yes, it's Fred Dedman Park. It is a 1 mile loop. It is large. It is all on asphalt. It is largely in the sun. It's in August, and it was a questionable decision.
So most of his races are really in horrible times of the year. So, you got, we say LAS, but I think what gets lost in this is Steve Durbin. Because let's face it, Steve is like Trent talked about last week. LAS is the idea man. Steve is the one that executes the plan, right?
Yep.
So anyway, don't want to miss out on Steve in this conversation because he's extremely instrumental. So you did that one, you survived that one. I mean, I guess you just went around and like any part. I mean, at any time did you think this is ridiculous? I got to stop this, or what was that like? So
there are a couple of stories that came out of that race. The first one is, my husband is older than me and got to start before me. So I'm there kind of crewing in for a few hours before I get to start. And I look right at my husband, because you start with your age cohort. And I look at him and I said, I need you to rein it in. Don't start out too fast. You want to get 100 miles.
Right.
So he lines up, and there's this guy. I've never seen him before in my life. I've never seen him since. But he lines up and he ties on the headband and he's ready and he's going and he's ready to go. And I saw my husband look at him and I went,
this is not going to go well.
And they take off. And he comes around and I'm like, so you're going at an 8:40 pace. This is mile 1 of 100 miles.
Well, you can't do this.
You can't do this.
I mean, some people can do it.
Hey, can't do this.
But he is not one that can.
He comes around and he's now 2 miles in. And I'm like, are you here to 9:0, whatever? I'm like, can we
slow down?
Simmer down, son. This is your first 100. We went about 3 or 4 miles. And he's like, I guess I can slow down. I'm like, that guy went to stop and take water. What? Stop it.
Right.
So he finished, but ended up spending the last 10 miles walking around the loop with a chicken salad sandwich in his hand. Well, I mean, so whatever.
That's whatever you got to get to get.
What you got to do.
I mean, some people some people have to finish that way. The important thing is you finished. And so you were talking about last, I guess one more race that we'll hit on before we move on to some other stuff was, it was the Barkley Fall Classic. And this one didn't exactly end extremely well for you, but
it ended.
It ended. So you ran BFC, and I guess it was not this past year, but the year before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So almost 2 years ago, we had COVID last year, it shut everything down. So when you think about that race, why is that a race that really stands out to you as one that really kind of means something?
So I would say that year he had modified the course, so somehow he managed to make it that you hit every up in the park. And so it was really as challenging as people say it is. But I never felt defeated at any point in the race, which is unusual. I get into a bad headspace a lot during tough races. And I always just remember thinking, I gotta keep going because I gotta get to the cool part that everybody talks about, which is insane. Because when I got to the cool part that everybody talks about, it was as insane as I thought it would be.
You talking about rat jaw?
There's rat jaw and then there's testicle spectacle. Right, and it was again very hot that day, and so everyone was getting cramps. I remember trying to go down a steep decline, and most of us were doing it on our backsides to get down, but at some point you had to stand up. And I just remember braking to allow runners to come back the other way, and I got a Charlie horse so bad that you just kind of fall off into the side. You're like, I just gotta stay here and work it out. And everybody's like, you okay, Charlie horse? All right. And you're just trying to get out of the way because it's narrow.
Right.
Get past that, we get to the top of testicle spectacle after we've done our out and back on it. And these poor high school students, Laz always supports local high schools, which I love.
Which is amazing.
And these poor high school students were serving at the aid station at the top, and they're seeing all these 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old athletes scrabbling up this hill, which is now worn down from everybody sliding on their backsides down. And they're getting up and they're covered in dirt and they're passing out at the top and they've got cramps and everything. And I mean, the poor kids, all they have are like bananas and Gatorade to offer you. And they're like, these adults, these are like my parents' age, and they're just like crying.
Right, pretty much when you run that race. So you did it. You finished it, but you went over the time. So even though you finished the race,
counts as a do not finish.
But you did finish it though.
Yeah.
That you know what, and I think that means a lot, because just being able to finish it, whether you get the time or not, is still, in my book, it's a finish, because it's not easy.
Well, and he gives you a decision point. So that's the other thing that makes this really tough. You get to about, 20, 25 miles in, nobody really knows because you're not allowed to wear your GPS watch. And he stands there and he goes, all right, you gonna go on or not? And if you say, well, I don't want to, then you just go down and, maybe a few more miles and you're done. But I had enough time, so I was like, I'll keep going. Well, the last climb did me in, and I was literally laying on a rock at the top of this climb, and I had about 3 miles down Bird Mountain to go, and I'm just laying on the rock, and people were coming up behind me, and they're like, which way do I go? Because you could have gone, right or down, and I'm like, that way, and I'm like, hi, I'm dying.
Right.
So the sweeper came up upon me, and he's like, are you gonna make it? I'm like, well, there's really no way to get me down if I don't make it. So I was able to get myself together and finish, but yeah, I was about 20, 25 minutes over the official cutoff time. But
hey,
it's a story.
It's a story. You finished it, even though you may not have gotten the credit for it. So moving on from that, I think a couple of things to hit on with Colleen is the thing that really makes, I think, Colleen special as more than just somebody who runs is how she gives back to the running community. So some of the things you've done that I know of, you were a mentor for Fleet Feet in Murfreesboro. You did the half marathon, kind of the beginner program, right?
Yep.
And so you did that. You did that for a couple years, right? Mm-hmm. So what was the draw for that? What was the deciding point that said, hey, you know what? I want to try to help people train to do this, because it's not easy. No. It's not, because you have to deal with people and personalities and something that you may give up on, may not give up on, somebody else may give up like that. So you got to keep them motivated, you got to keep them going. So what was the draw there?
So I think what I found in running is that there's a certain amount of, I don't know what you want to call it, confidence, swagger that you get when you do something physically, mentally, emotionally taxing, and it makes everything that comes after it not look as hard.
Mm-hmm.
When I have completed an insane run for 50 miles on a beach, and then I show up the next morning for work and my boss gives me this really hard task and it's a really stressful day, comparatively, I'm like, I got this, because I've done that really hard thing that took everything I had to get it done.
Right.
And so it's like if I could bottle that and give that to somebody else, give them that confidence. I know a lot of people struggle with confidence. They feel like, imposter syndrome, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. And if I could bottle that kind of confidence for somebody and give it to them, I would. And to me, this is the closest thing to that. If you go out and you challenge yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, which is what running really does, especially distance running, that gives you that confidence, in my mind. I haven't found anyone yet who's run a really hard race who hasn't been at the end ecstatic by having finished and feeling really empowered and strong. So I guess that's what it is.
So you did that and you had a pretty good success, right?
Yep. People finished. And right? I've met other folks who have continued to run with us. We'll talk about it in a minute, but one of the business partners here for our Mad Cow running company is a runner who we met in our training programs and who is now participating in ultra marathons and trail races and signing up for 100 milers. So not everybody has to run that far to get the same effect.
No, you don't have to. Trust me, people, you don't. You can have the effect running much shorter distances.
Yes, you can.
So you did that. Another thing you did from a running community standpoint, you help pace races. I know you pace at the Middle Half, which is in Murfreesboro as well. Same thing. You just enjoy helping people. It's fun because I paced for the first time 2 years ago.
Yeah, we paced together.
Yep. We paced together. And you're right. I think it feels good, like helping somebody, and then having them come up to you after the end of the race and give you a hug. Of course, you could hug back then.
Back in the day,
you could breathe on people back then. But anyway, you could get a hug or a handshake or just thank you so much. I could have not have gotten through this without your motivation or your whatever. That you helped me. I helped a lady with a PR, and she was just like, "Thank you so much," and I was just blown away because I didn't. When you're doing it, you don't think about that. You're just thinking about, let me just help these people survive.
Don't mess up their time.
Don't die. Right, and you see them looking at their watch, and you're looking at your watch, and it's a lot of pressure, but it feels good to help people.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I did the 2-hour pace group the year that you and I paced together, and it must be something about that 2-hour kind of line. Somebody feels like when they've done a half marathon in under 2 hours, that's
right. It feels really good.
Really, that's their achievement, and it's not to say, and it's completely an arbitrary line, but some people set that as their goal, and so I had the 2-hour pace group. We did. We were right on pace and everything was looking good. And it was fun to watch as we started to get into that last 2 miles, people were still feeling good in my group. And they were like, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to go for it. And I'm like, go do your thing.
Right, just get it done.
It was a great experience to do the 2-hour group. I've done, I think, 2:15 or 2:30 before. And those folks were fun, but it was a different kind of fun because everybody was much more relaxed. We could all breathe. We could get oxygen.
Right, because you're over that 2-hour point.
Yeah, we were looking to these were folks who were looking to do their first time run and folks who were just looking to finish and have a good time so that they would continue coming back.
Right, absolutely. So, yeah, I definitely can tell you from pacing a 2:15 group, that group is definitely a little bit. They're. You
guys are having more fun. We were breathing hard on our group.
Yeah, we had more of the party going on. So, all right. So, transitioning from all that, we'll sidebar real quick because one thing that I've not talked a lot about is my running story, and I think what gets lost a lot of times is if I had met Colleen and joined the Mad Cow running group, which she started with her and a couple other people, I probably would not be ultra running.
You would have made better choices.
I would have made better choices because I started running in Murfreesboro. I was a very social runner. I ran a half marathon a year. That was my good point. I felt good about myself. And then I met a guy who ended up, is one of my best friends. He talked me into doing a marathon, which was a poor decision, but I did it. And then from there, he turned me on to this running group and go check out the Mad Cow running group. And so I went to the Mad Cow running group, and Colleen was there, and she was, went over the route, and I'm hanging out with these people. We're drinking beer, and there's never any good decisions made with alcohol. And so I remember one of them saying, "You should run a 50K." And I was like, "What's a 50K?" And they're like, "Well, you ran a marathon. It's only 5 miles more."
That's how we always sell people. It's only 5 miles.
It's only 5 miles more, which didn't tell me about all the other things that happened in the 5 miles. But anyway, so I got to meet. So without meeting Colleen and Joel, and of course there were some other people in the group that helped me get there as well, I probably would not have gotten into ultra running. Probably still be running a half marathon every year, not really doing what I'm doing now. So you created the Mad Cow running. These hats are actually kind of older. We've had them for a long time. And so it's a group that meets, we meet weekly. We meet, we run, we have a beer or so afterwards, and we kind of hang out and talk. So you did that, which was huge. Lots of people really came up out of that group, which was amazing. So you did that, which is still going strong, and then you decided you wanted to open a running store. And so one of the people who you coached ended up being one of your best friends, arguably could be your very best friend. You guys are always running together. And she's actually one of your people that's starting this business with. So what made you decide to open a running store?
So Murfreesboro, we loved it. We had the run group there, but they have a Fleet Feet, so we thought, let's go see what else we've got going on. So obviously one of our partners, Monica Moore, and then the other one is my husband, Joel Lawrence. We got together kind of independently. My husband and I and Monica had wanted to open a running store, and it just so happened that we independently talked it over and got together and decided, let's do this. The reason to open it, I think, is to give us an opportunity to meet more people. So we've spent a lot of this interview talking about crazy races and ultra running, but having a store and a platform and the ability to organize and have the infrastructure allows us to do so much more with our community. So we'll have walk groups. We have 3 walk groups or 4 walk groups a week, and we have some that meet early in the morning, 5:30 a.m., some that are going to meet a little bit later in the morning. Mm-hmm. We'll have some run groups. We'll continue to have our one in Murfreesboro. And the tagline for us is get moving.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that's really what it's all about. It's getting people out and active in their community, doing things together, playing outside. Because, I think we forget that, as we get busy, as we have stressors and responsibilities as adults, then we still need to go out and play. And so that's kind of the platform we're hoping to utilize, and kind of the angle we're coming at people from. Come out, get moving with us, come out and play. I mean, there's a lot to be gained from being active.
And I think that's important, the community part, because if you really look at it, and the more I think about it, you think about it, and I don't know if you've ever taken the time to think about it, but if you think about all the people that you've been a part of from an influence standpoint, maybe directly, indirectly, within just the running group that you're in, that has finished their first ultra marathons because of being within your group. I mean, I could call off tons of names, but nobody will know who we're talking about. But you know who I'm talking about. There's a lot of people. It's really a big deal. And you think about it, like, there's 2 of us in this building right now. Monica's in the back slinging merchandise, and but there's just so many people, and I guess that is so huge, because when you think about community, if you can build something like that and help people stretch themselves and do things they didn't think they could do. Because if you would have told me 10 years ago that I'd be running 50 miles, 100 miles, whatever, right? I would have told you you were crazy, right? And so I think that's super cool.
So you made the comment, it was an interesting comment about reflecting on what influence I may have had about runners and what they do now as runners in terms of ultra running. And I don't really think I've ever thought about it too much, because when people come up to me and say, well, I wouldn't have run this race, or I wouldn't have, tried this, or whatever the event is, if I hadn't met you or your run group. And I sit there and I think, but you had it in you all along. This is who you are. You're the one that showed up and did the run and did the training in the hot weather or the early morning or the late evening. I just scheduled it. Right. And showed up and fussed at you to make sure you had water and nutrition on the run.
Well, I think the important thing is that one thing you're missing is sometimes you need people to get you organized so that you can get a plan and you can get moving.
Get moving. Well done.
See how I did that? So, all right. Well, all right. So anyway, back to your store real quick. Your store we're in the process of getting it together now, right? And we're about a week away. And the grand opening is June 1st.
Yep, June 1st.
June 1st in McMinnville. Sits here on the corner by the Walgreens. It'll be open. They're going to have a ton of stuff. They're going to have Solomon, Ultra, Garmin, Coros.
Aftershock, Swiftlet, Goo. We've got stuff for folks who like to run with their dogs. We've got dog harnesses.
And then people who maybe don't want to make the long drive to McMinnville, you will have an online store.
The website is in progress. I think the store will physically be open a little bit before the website to online shop will be open. And we also have cow gear. So we'll have Boco cow hats. We have shirts.
Very nice.
We have socks. Yeah, so we'll have some custom cow gear too if you want to represent the herd as you're out and about in the community.
Perfect. Well, I think that's it. Thank you, Colleen, for sitting with me. And everybody, we will see you on the trail.